My nephew laughed as he forced papers on me after my stroke. Just a formality, they sneered. When my mind cleared, I meticulously gathered proof of their deceit, then declared, "You'll get nothing. Not a penny of my legacy." Before we begin, share in the comments, what would you do in that situation? Every voice matters. Thank you. The world had fractured. One moment, I was tending to my prize-winning hydrangeas in the late afternoon sun, the familiar scent of damp earth and blossoms filling my lungs. The next, a blinding white light, a searing pain behind my eyes, and the ground rushing up to meet me with alarming speed. Then, only a cacophony of distorted sounds and a suffocating darkness. When I finally drifted back to consciousness, it was to the sterile tang of antiseptic and the persistent, rhythmic hum of unseen machinery. My head throbbed with a dull, insistent ache, and my left arm felt strangely heavy, disconnected. A kindly-faced doctor, his voice a soothing murmur, explained the minor stroke. He spoke of temporary disorientation, of the importance of rest, of a gradual return to normalcy. But normalcy felt a million miles away, a hazy concept shimmering just beyond my grasp. I was 78 years old, accustomed to a life of vibrant independence, the keeper of the ancestral home, a sprawling, beloved sanctuary that had housed 5 generations of my family. Now vulnerability clung to me like a shroud. A cold knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Who would care for me? Who would navigate the labyrinth of bills, the subtle hum of the old furnace, the endless demands of a home that was as much a part of me as my own heart? My thoughts, still sluggish and fragmented, drifted to my nephew, Marcus, and his wife, Chloe. They lived a few towns over, their visits infrequent but always accompanied by an almost theatrical display of affection. A pang of relief, swift and potent, washed over me, quickly followed by a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of unease. A feeling I couldn't quite articulate, like a shadow briefly passing over the sun. Barely 24 hours after the hospital had discharged me, setting me adrift in the unfamiliar current of impaired mobility and fragmented memory. The insistent chime of the doorbell reverberated through the quiet of my foyer. My heart, still fluttering with an anxious arrhythmia, gave a little jump. There they stood, framed in the afternoon light filtering through the stained glass transom above the door, Marcus and Chloe. Their faces were a carefully composed tableau of exaggerated concern, their expressions honed to perfection, almost too flawless, too symmetrical in their portrayal of familial devotion. Marcus, always impeccably dressed in a crisp, unlined shirt that seemed to defy wrinkles, rushed forward, his arms outstretched. "Aunt Alina, oh my dear, we were so dreadfully worried," he exclaimed, his voice a rich, resonant baritone that always sounded slightly amplified, like a stage actor delivering a line. His embrace was swift, perfunctory, a fleeting brush of fabric against my still tender shoulder. His gaze, however, did not linger on me. It darted past my frail form, sweeping across the grand expanse of the foyer, as if cataloguing its contents, assessing its worth, an almost imperceptible gleam in his eyes that I, in my weakened state, couldn't quite decipher. Chloe, radiating an almost sickly sweet aura, clutched a bouquet of pristine white lilies, their petals already beginning to curl at the edges, slowly succumbing to the warmth of the hall, much like my own fragile strength. "We're here to help, dearest Alina," she cooed, her voice a saccharine melody that, even then, grated subtly on my raw, exposed nerves. "You just rest. We'll take care of everything. Absolutely everything." Their arrival, though superficially comforting, felt less like a genuine act of solace and more like a precisely choreographed invasion. There was a subtle shift in the very air of my beloved home, once thick with the comforting sense of old books and brewing tea, now permeated by an unspoken agenda, a sense of quiet intrusion that left me feeling oddly breathless, as if the oxygen in the room had suddenly thinned. My stroke, though deemed minor by the doctors, had left me profoundly disoriented. My thoughts swam like sluggish, bewildered fish in murky waters, my memory a sieve, unable to hold on to names, recent events, or even simple tasks for more than a fleeting moment. It was a terrifying sensation, like trying to grasp smoke. This vulnerability, I would soon learn with a clarity that stung, was precisely what they had been waiting for, what they had perhaps even hoped for. They moved through my home with an unsettling efficiency, an almost predatory grace. Marcus, with his neatly trimmed beard and an air of self-importance, immediately took charge of my affairs. He handled the bills, his brow furrowed in a pantomime of deep concern as he tutted over my disorganized paperwork, my meticulously kept ledgers now dismissed as chaotic scribbles. He spoke in hushed tones about streamlining my finances, about modernizing my accounts, words that sounded benign but felt subtly menacing. Chloe, meanwhile, embarked on a zealous tidying spree. Her hands, adorned with glittering rings, moved swiftly, cataloging every piece of antique furniture, every valuable heirloom. "Oh, this old thing," she'd say, a dismissive wave of her slender hand belying the sharp, acquisitive gleam in her eyes as she ran her fingers over the intricately carved details of my grandmother's mahogany writing desk, an item cherished through generations. They spoke in low, conspiratorial whispers when they thought I was napping, their voices like whispers of silk against sandpaper, always just out of my conscious grasp, yet leaving a residue of uneasy suspicion, a faint, metallic taste of dread in my mouth. The subtle shift in control was insidious, a slow, silent seep that began to erode my sense of autonomy, even as they plied me with endless cups of lukewarm chamomile tea and saccharine reassurances of their unwavering love. My precious haven, where I had spent a lifetime nurturing memories and traditions, now felt like a stage upon which a meticulously planned drama was unfolding, with me, the lead, struggling to recall my lines. While two eager, calculating understudies rehearsed their roles in the shadows, their movements precise, their intentions chillingly clear. The warmth of my home, once a comfort, now felt like a subtle prison, its venerable walls silently closing in, their presence a constant, suffocating weight that made me feel utterly powerless against their calculated, relentless push towards an unknown, ominous future. Chapter 2, The Serpent's Embrace of Paperwork. The deceptive charm of their initial, help, quickly dissolved, revealing a relentless campaign of pressure that tightened around me like a constricting serpent. It began subtly, insidiously, with Marcus, ever the picture of poised authority, presenting what he casually referred to as important papers for my signature. His voice, usually so smooth and resonant, would adopt a low, insistent hum, like a bee buzzing persistently around a wilting flower. "Just routine stuff, Antelina," he'd declare, his expression carefully devoid of any undue emotion. "Powers of attorney medical directives. Standard procedure after something like this, to make sure you're properly taken care of, legally speaking, of course." He would lay the documents on the polished surface of the coffee table, a formidable stack of dense legalese that swam before my still-recovering eyes, the tiny print blurring into an incomprehensible tangle of loops and lines. My tentative requests to read them slowly, to truly understand their implications, to even have them explained by an independent lawyer, were consistently met with patronizing smiles and dismissive waves of his hand. "Oh, Auntie, don't fuss yourself with all that tedious jargon," Chloe would chime in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, like honey laced with something bitter. "Marcus handles all of our important documents, too. He's simply brilliant with these things. We just want to make sure you're protected, darling. Completely safe, completely secure." Their words, though ostensibly benevolent, were laced with an insidious impatience, their eyes, darting and restless, subtly urging me to hurry, to simply sign, to not ask too many questions. The very air in the room would grow heavy with their unspoken expectation, their combined will pressing down on me, urging me towards compliance. One particularly hazy, disorienting afternoon, as I drifted in and out of a post-stroke nap, feeling more like a ghost in my own home than its matriarch, Marcus appeared, a slim, elegant pen clutched purposefully in his hand. The setting sun cast long, accusing shadows across the Persian rug, making the room feel both vast and claustrophobic. "Antelina," he began, his voice a low, insistent murmur, barely above a whisper, yet carrying an unsettling weight. "We just need your signature on these last few pages. It's for the house, to make sure everything's in order, for your future care, to secure your future, to make sure you're never in want." He didn't explain. He didn't offer a coherent summary. He simply pointed, his finger, long and unyielding, hovering over the blank lines, the stark white spaces that yearned for my name, my mark. His presence loomed over me, a physical manifestation of the immense pressure I felt building in my chest, making it difficult to draw a full breath. My hand, still trembling slightly from the lingering effects of the stroke, shook as I grasped the pen, the cool metal a stark contrast to the clammy warmth of my palm. My thoughts, still too muddled to comprehend the true, devastating weight of the ink I was about to spill, felt like fragments of glass, sharp yet impossible to piece together. I remembered the subtle pressure of his arm, not quite a comforting embrace, but more like a physical anchor around my shoulder, preventing me from pulling back, from truly seeing, truly understanding the words written on the legal pages before me. The late afternoon light from the window seemed too bright, too harsh, illuminating every dust mote in the air, while the quiet of the room felt too loud, amplifying the frantic, racing thoughts in my head, a confused chorus of warnings that I couldn't quite grasp, couldn't quite articulate. Every nerve in my weakened body screamed a silent, inarticulate protest, a vague, formless dread. But their combined will, their insistent murmurs of just a formality, dearest. For your safety, of course. We wouldn't want you to worry, chipped away at my dwindling resistance, wearing me down, draining my resolve until I felt nothing but a hollow ache. The ancestral home, my haven, my sanctuary, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a living monument to my lineage, a breathing entity filled with the echoes of generations. Every creak of the floorboards held a whispered secret, every worn pattern on the antique wallpaper held a story. It was the backdrop to my childhood laughter, the silent witness to my greatest joys and deepest sorrows. It held the faint scent of my mother's lavender sachets, the lingering warmth of Robert's pipe tobacco in his study, the joyful chaos of holiday gatherings. Now, these two, with their forced smiles and thinly veiled avarice, were trying to strip me of my very roots, of the tangible history that defined me. I felt a profound sense of violation, a quiet rage like a dormant volcano, simmering beneath the surface of my confusion. They didn't see me, Eleanor, the keeper of stories, the nurturer of tradition, the architect of a life well lived. They saw only the potential, the dormant asset waiting to be exploited, the valuable property ripe for the taking. Their efforts were relentless, a slow, methodical siege on my autonomy. They even began the process of packing away certain items, explaining, "Oh, this old thing. It needs to be stored somewhere safe, Auntie. It's too valuable to just sit out like this, don't you agree? We're just protecting your precious things." My attempts to object, my soft protests about not wanting specific items moved, were dismissed with a dismissive wave, my concerns brushed aside like bothersome cobwebs. Each signature, forced or coerced, felt like a piece of my very soul chipped away. A silent scream trapped within the confines of my still recovering mind. The warmth of my home, once a comforting embrace, now felt like a subtle prison. Its venerable walls slowly closing in, their presence a constant, suffocating weight, making me feel utterly powerless against their calculated, relentless push towards an inevitable and terrifying dispossession. The stroke had robbed me of my quick wit, my usual sharp retort, leaving me adrift in a sea of hazy thoughts. I couldn't articulate my fears, couldn't summon the words to demand clarity, to insist on my rights. Their control was absolute, insidious, and utterly suffocating. They managed my meals, my medications, my very schedule, each action subtly reinforcing my helplessness, my dependence on them. Marcus would often sigh dramatically after a phone call, "Just another one of your creditors, Aunt Eleanor. Good thing I'm here to sort it out." Chloe would cluck her tongue, "Honestly, for someone so brilliant in her youth, you're quite disorganized now, aren't you, dearest?" Their words were like tiny, persistent needles, pricking at my self-worth, making me doubt my own capabilities, my own memory. The ancestral home, once my fortress of solitude and cherished memories, was steadily being stripped of its essence, transformed into a mere commodity, a valuable asset awaiting liquidation. I was trapped, a butterfly caught in a spider's web, watching helplessly as my legacy, my life's work, slipped through my fingers. The helplessness was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth, a constant reminder of my physical and mental vulnerability. The cold realization of their true intentions began to solidify, slowly, agonizingly, like ice forming on a winter pond, hardening my heart against the two smiling faces that promised care while stealing my very future. The weight of their betrayal pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating, making me yearn for the clarity that seemed forever just beyond my reach. Every signature, every forced agreement was a tiny death, pushing me closer to a despair I desperately fought to resist. Chapter 3, The Unveiling of Malice. The truth, when it finally shattered the veil of their deceit, was not a gentle revelation, but a brutal, visceral punch to the gut. It arrived with a chilling clarity that pierced through the lingering fog of my post-stroke recovery, a clarity born of their own hubris. I had insisted on a rare moment of solitude that afternoon, a precious hour away from Marcus and Chloe's smothering, performative care. They had gone out, ostensibly for important errands, related to my future comfort, a phrase that now tasted like ash in my mouth. They believed me to be comfortably napping, oblivious, lost in the hazy world of my stroke-affected mind. But on this particular day, my hearing felt preternaturally acute, every sound in the quiet house amplified, every distant murmur distinct. I heard the familiar crunch of their car tires on the gravel driveway, then the cheerful clatter of keys, and the faint murmur of their voices as they entered through the back door, heading directly for the kitchen. Usually the kitchen was a sanctuary of mundane sounds, water running, dishes clinking, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. But today the tone was different, charged with a giddy exuberance, almost conspiratorial. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a primal, instinctual alarm bell clamoring in my ears. I pushed myself up, slowly, painstakingly, from the deep cushions of my armchair, my legs still unsteady beneath me, my muscles protesting with dull aches. Each movement was a deliberate act of will, a silent struggle against the lingering weakness in my limbs, a testament to the flicker of suspicion that had ignited within me. I moved towards the kitchen, drawn by an invisible thread of dread, an unshakable feeling that something momentous, something terrible was being said. As I neared the doorway, carefully, silently, their voices grew louder, clearer, infused with an unmistakable, triumphant glee that made my blood run cold. "I can't believe it, Marcus." Chloe's voice, usually a carefully modulated instrument of saccharine charm, was now sharp, jubilant, almost shrill with unbridled excitement. "She signed everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. We're rich." There was a distinct clinking sound, the crystalline echo of glasses toasting, a celebration of my undoing. Then Marcus, his voice thick with unadulterated triumph, echoed her sentiment, a chillingly smug resonance that sent shivers down my spine. "I told you she was an easy mark. A little stroke, a little confusion, and boom, it's all ours just like we planned. Easier than taking candy from a baby." My breath hitched in my throat, a cold, suffocating dread washing over me, more potent than any lingering pain from the stroke. The very air in the house seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of their profound, calculated deceit. Then came the cruelest blow, a phrase that would forever be etched into the core of my being, searing itself into my memory with a searing heat. Chloe's laughter, a brittle, mocking sound that splintered the silence, filled the space, a sound that would haunt my sleepless nights for weeks to come. That senile old fool, she didn't even read a single line. She just signed like a docile sheep being led to slaughter. We just pointed and she signed. It was almost too easy. My blood ran cold, a glacial current flowing through my veins, leaving a trail of ice in its wake. The image of Marcus hovering over me, his hand resting on my trembling shoulder, pointing insistently to the signature lines on those damning papers. His face a meticulously crafted mask of false concern, flashed before my eyes. Every dismissive wave of his hand, every patronizing smile, every hurried, muddled explanation suddenly clicked into place, forming a hideous, undeniable mosaic of their betrayal, each piece slotting perfectly into the horrifying puzzle. My confusion hadn't been a weakness to be understood, a condition to be empathized with. It had been a vulnerability to be ruthlessly exploited, a gaping gateway to their insatiable greed. The future comfort they spoke of, the endless platitudes about my well-being, were for them, not for me. The papers weren't for my protection, but for my dispossession, a legal maneuver to strip me of my ancestral home, the very foundation of my being, ripping it away with a swift, brutal finality by the very people I had welcomed into my life, the family I had trusted implicitly. My limbs still felt like lead, heavy and unresponsive, but a different kind of strength began to surge through me, hot and undeniable. A primal, protective instinct that burned away the last vestiges of despair. It was the fierce, unyielding resolve of a lioness wounded but not defeated, whose territory had been invaded, whose cubs were threatened. They thought I was a senile old fool, an easy mark, a helpless old woman to be fleeced and discarded. They thought they had won. But their cruel words, their blatant, heartless mockery, had inadvertently provided me with the very clarity I needed, a shocking jolt that tore through the remaining haze in my mind. The fog, once a debilitating hindrance, now began to lift rapidly, replaced by a searing, righteous anger that burned away the last vestiges of confusion, solidifying into a crystalline understanding of their profound malice. I stood there, unseen in the doorway, a silent, trembling witness to their grotesque celebration of my undoing. Their laughter was a venomous poison, but it was also, paradoxically, a powerful antidote, shocking me awake to the true, horrifying nature of their hearts, revealing the depths of their depravity. The moments stretched agonizingly as I absorbed the full weight of their calculated treachery. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about a profound violation of trust, a desecration of sacred family bonds, a brutal assault on my very soul. The realization was a devastating blow, tearing open old wounds. But it also hammered into place a steel resolve, cold and unyielding, that would become the unshakable cornerstone of my impending fight. The battle for my home, my legacy, and my very dignity had just begun, and I, Elena, was ready to wage war. Chapter 4. The Whispers of a Lifeline. The days that followed the overheard confession were a torturous blur, a suffocating crucible of suppressed fury and methodical, almost obsessive, observation. I maintained my fragile facade of mild confusion, a performance that grew more challenging with each passing hour, allowing Marcus and Chloe to continue their grotesque charade of devoted care. All the while, my mind, now sharper than a honed blade, absorbed every detail of their movements, every dismissive glance, every hushed conspiratorial conversation. The effort was immense, a constant, draining strain on my still recovering strength, each moment a tightrope walk between feigned compliance and burgeoning defiance. But the searing memory of Chloe's mocking laughter, the image of Marcus's smug, triumphant grin, was a potent fuel, burning away my exhaustion, keeping me alert and focused. I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my bones, that I couldn't fight them alone, not in my current state. My thoughts, persistent and unyielding, turned to Susan, my dear friend of 50 years. Susan, a retired paralegal with a mind as sharp as broken glass and an unyielding sense of justice, was the only person I trusted implicitly, the only one who would believe the unbelievable truth I now held, the crushing weight of their betrayal. She was my only hope. Getting in touch with Susan, however, proved to be an unexpected and daunting challenge. Marcus and Chloe, with their insidious efficiency, had subtly, yet effectively, cut me off from the outside world. My landline phone, once a reliable link to my life, was always misplaced or charging in some obscure corner of the house, conveniently out of my reach. My cell phone, a simple flip phone I barely used, had mysteriously vanished altogether. My mail, once delivered directly to my waiting hand, was now conveniently sorted by Marcus before it reached me, any letters from friends or familiar institutions vanishing into his impenetrable files. The mere act of trying to find my address book, a worn, leather-bound testament to a lifetime of cherished connections, became a high-stakes stealth mission. I'd wait for hours, feigning a deep post-stroke sleep, listening to the rhythm of their movements, until they were engrossed in their own avaricious affairs. Chloe on the phone, her voice animated, discussing potential renovations to my home, Marcus poring over what I strongly suspected were my meticulously kept financial statements, his brow furrowed in concentration. My limbs, though still weak and prone to trembling, moved with a newfound purpose, propelled by a desperate urgency. Each careful, silent step was a victory, each retrieved item a tiny piece of my autonomy, slowly, painstakingly reclaimed from their grasping hands. The day I finally located my address book, tucked away in a dusty, forgotten drawer in my old sewing cabinet, a drawer Marcus had dismissed as cluttered, and Chloe had deemed unworthy of her organization, felt like unearthing a buried treasure, a lifeline thrown from a distant shore. My fingers, still a bit stiff from the stroke, fumbled with the worn pages, tracing Susan's familiar number, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. The first call was a terrifying ordeal, fraught with the risk of exposure. Marcus hovered nearby, ostensibly, helping me find a comfortable sweater, his eyes subtly tracking my movements. I feigned a sudden, violent coughing fit, my body racked with a genuine tremor, pretending to dial Susan's number by accidental misdial. "Oh dear, wrong number," I exclaimed, my heart pounding a frantic drum solo against my ribs as I quickly fumbled to hang up. But the brief connection had confirmed it. The line worked. The next attempt, late one night when I was certain they were asleep, their soft snores echoing faintly from their bedroom, was successful. Susan's familiar voice, warm and grounded, was like a lifeline cast into a turbulent, storm-tossed sea. "Elena, oh my goodness, Elena, I've been so dreadfully worried. I've tried calling you for weeks, but your phone just rings and rings or goes straight to voicemail," she exclaimed, her usual calm replaced by a palpable concern. My voice, though weak and trembling with the effort, was filled with a desperate urgency, a raw, unfiltered plea. "Susan, I need your help. They're trying to take my home. They tricked me into signing papers." I poured out the story, a torrent of suppressed fear and rage. The stroke, their seemingly benevolent arrival, the manipulative signatures, the chilling overheard conversation. Susan listened in stunned, incredulous silence, her usual calm demeanor slowly dissolving into a simmering, righteous anger that I could almost feel radiating through the phone line. "Eleanor, stay calm," she finally said, her voice firm, resolute, cutting through my distress like a sharp knife. "This is a big deal, a very big deal. We need a lawyer, a good one, and we need proof. Can you get any documents? Any recordings, anything at all?" Her questions, though daunting and demanding of action I barely felt capable of, paradoxically brought a profound wave of clarity. I wasn't alone. I had an ally, a true friend who believed me, who validated my horrifying truth. Susan's immediate, visceral outrage, her unwavering belief in my story, was the powerful validation I desperately needed, a balm to my bruised spirit. "Yes," I whispered, a fierce, unyielding determination hardening my voice, shaping it into something I barely recognized. "I will. I'll get everything, I promise you." The clandestine conversation ended with a meticulously crafted plan. Susan would immediately contact David, a reputable elder law attorney she knew, and would arrange to visit me discreetly as soon as possible, under the guise of a friendly check-in or a social call. Something Marcus and Chloe couldn't easily object to. The tiny spark of resistance, ignited by their blatant mockery and cemented by their overheard confession, now blazed into a full-blown, all-consuming fire, fueled by Susan's unwavering support and my burning desire for justice. Their profound underestimation of me, their cruel, arrogant assumption that my mind was as muddled and incapacitated as my initial post-stroke state, would ultimately prove to be their fatal undoing. They had unwittingly unleashed a formidable force they never knew existed within the senile old fool they thought they could so easily discard. My home, my legacy, my dignity, these were not just abstract concepts. They were worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. And I, Eleanor, would fight with every fiber of my being, every ounce of strength I could muster, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Chapter 5. The silent vigil of evidence. The weeks that followed Susan's clandestine call transformed my seemingly quiet recovery into a high-stakes covert operation. A meticulous game of espionage, played within the very walls of my ancestral home. My main task, as assigned by Susan and soon confirmed by David, the astute elder law attorney she had swiftly secured, was to gather irrefutable evidence. This was a treacherous game of cat and mouse, played under the watchful, albeit complacent, eyes of Marcus and Chloe, who remained blissfully unaware of the awakening they had unwittingly triggered. Every day was a delicate, nerve-wracking balance between maintaining my carefully constructed, confused old lady facade, a performance I honed with subtle tremors and selective forgetfulness, and meticulously executing my secret mission. My body was still healing, aching with the lingering effects of the stroke. But my mind, sharpened by a potent cocktail of anger, purpose, and a burning desire for retribution, was working overtime, calculating, planning, observing. The first, and perhaps most crucial, step was to discreetly access my financial records. Marcus had helpfully taken over all my banking and utility payments, claiming it was too much stress for me to manage. He had even, under the guise of simplifying things and modernizing my antiquated systems, set up all my accounts for online access, managed exclusively from his personal laptop. My physical bank statements, which I usually received by mail and painstakingly filed, had mysteriously stopped arriving, replaced by vague assurances that everything was being handled electronically. "Auntie, so much easier for you." This meant I had to find a way to get my hands on his laptop while it was unlocked, or failing that, somehow deduce his passwords. This felt like scaling Mount Everest with only a butter knife, a seemingly insurmountable task given their constant presence and his meticulous nature. I spent hours observing their habits, a silent, unblinking sentinel, noting when Marcus left his laptop unattended, even for a fleeting moment, perhaps when he stepped out to refill his coffee cup, or when Chloe distracted him with some trivial complaint. My opportunity finally arrived one breezy afternoon when Marcus, momentarily distracted by a lengthy, exasperated phone call in the garden, left his laptop open on the kitchen counter, its screen a tantalizing portal to my financial life. My heart pounded like a furious drum solo against my ribs as I shuffled towards it, feigning a sudden, intense interest in the wilting lilies Chloe had brought days earlier, their petals now curled and browning at the edges. My fingers, still a bit stiff and prone to trembling from the stroke's lingering effects, fumbled awkwardly with the trackpad, navigating the unfamiliar interface, searching for the banking website, praying he hadn't logged out. A gasp of profound relief, barely audible, escaped my lips as the familiar login page appeared, already populated with my account numbers. I quickly, furiously, jotted down every detail I could see: account balances, recent transactions, and most crucially, noted several large, unexplained transfers, five-figure sums, cascading out of my primary savings account into accounts I didn't recognize. Accounts clearly not for my care or comfort. These were not mere fees or investments. These were undeniable acts of blatant theft, confirming my worst fears, solidifying the cold, hard truth of their profound avarice. Beyond financials, I desperately needed proof of their insidious verbal abuse and relentless gaslighting. Susan, with her sharp legal mind, had strongly suggested discreet recording. I remembered a tiny digital voice recorder my late husband, Robert, had used for his bird-watching notes, a relic of his quiet passion, tucked away in the forgotten recesses of his old mahogany desk. Finding it was another monumental challenge, as Chloe, with her obsessive need to control, had already subjected that desk to her organization, declaring it cluttered and ripe for tidying. I waited until they were both out on one of their long, self-serving errands, their car pulling away from the driveway like a chariot of greedy triumph. Then I methodically searched, my hands brushing against dusty ledgers and forgotten mementos. Under a stack of ancient nature magazines, yellowed with age, I finally found it small, unassuming, and miraculously still working. Learning how to use it, to surreptitiously turn it on and off with a single, silent click, was a slow, frustrating process, my trembling fingers betraying my nervous excitement. But I persevered. The recorder became my constant companion, tucked into the deep pocket of my housecoat. It was my silent witness, capturing their condescending tones, their thinly veiled threats, their constant, insidious belittling of my intelligence, their casual cruelty. "You really are getting quite forgetful, Auntie," Chloe's voice, captured on tape, would say, after she had deliberately moved my reading glasses to a different room, then feigned surprise when I couldn't find them. "Perhaps living alone isn't wise for someone like you." Marcus's voice, smug and assured, confirmed on another recording, his words chillingly clear. "She's practically signed away everything. This house will be ours by next month, clear title. It's a done deal." Each recording, each piece of evidence, solidified my resolve, turning my quiet fear into a simmering, righteous fury, a fire that burned away the last vestiges of doubt. Naomi, my kind and observant home care nurse, a temporary one Susan had thoughtfully arranged, replacing a less observant caregiver, Marcus, and Chloe had insisted upon noticed the subtle shift in my demeanor. "You're looking stronger, Elena," she commented one morning, a flicker of genuine surprise in her eyes as she took my blood pressure. "There's a spark in you now, a real vitality." She didn't know the true depth of that spark, the unyielding fire it was fanning within me, the battle strategy I was meticulously constructing. As the days wore on, Marcus and Chloe, still utterly oblivious to my secret campaign, maintained their performance of doting concern. They would visit sporadically, offering superficial pleasantries, bringing token gifts of fruit or flowers, their smiles as plastic as their intentions. They seemed utterly confident in their imminent victory. Completely unaware that the senile old fool they thought they had so cleverly outsmarted was meticulously building the very case that would bring their carefully constructed world crashing down around them. Each fake smile they offered, each patronizing pat on my arm, each empty promise of future care, only served to deepen my conviction, fueling my determination to expose their profound betrayal and reclaim everything they had tried to steal. My home, my legacy, my dignity, these were not commodities to be traded, but sacred trusts to be defended, and I, Elena, was now armed and ready for war. Chapter 6. The unyielding facade cracks. The initial, subtle confrontation was not a full frontal assault, but a precise surgical strike. A carefully calculated move designed to test their defenses and, more importantly, to sow the first tiny seeds of doubt in their seemingly unshakable confidence. My dossier of evidence was growing, a damning collection of their deceit meticulously compiled piece by agonizing piece. But before unleashing its full weight, I needed to gauge their reaction, to witness their casual cruelty when challenged directly, to see if even a flicker of guilt, a ghost of remorse, still resided within them. The opportunity arose during one of their perfunctory family dinners. A grotesque charade held in my own elegant dining room, a space they were already mentally redecorating, planning its transformation into their own trophy room. Marcus, ever the master of superficial pleasantries, was prattling on about his latest dubious business venture, a vague endeavor that seemed to involve more talk than actual work, his voice a drone of self-importance. Chloe, across the table, sipped her expensive wine with delicate, precise movements, offering me saccharine smiles with her lips while her eyes subtly rolled heavenward when she thought Marcus wasn't looking, a silent commentary on his tiresome ego. I chose my moment carefully, waiting for a lull in their self-congratulatory chatter, a brief pause in their symphony of arrogance. My voice, though soft and a touch reedy from disuse, carried an unexpected, almost imperceptible edge that made Marcus pause mid-sentence, his fork hovering precariously over his plate. "Marcus," I began, my gaze steady, unwavering, holding his, forcing him to meet my eyes, "those papers you had me sign, the ones about the house. I've been thinking about them rather a lot lately." His face, usually so composed, so carefully devoid of any genuine emotion, flickered with a subtle, unmistakable unease. "Yes, Aunt Eleanor," he replied, his tone suddenly cautious, a distinct shift from his earlier joviality. "Just standard legal documents as we discussed, all for your protection, of course, to ensure your well-being, now and in the future." Chloe, ever the dutiful accomplice, quickly interjected, her voice too bright, too quick, a desperate attempt to patch the sudden crack in their narrative. "Yes, dearest Eleanor. Marcus has been so incredibly diligent, making sure everything is in perfect order, just in case, for any future eventualities." She trailed off, her forced smile tightening, her eyes darting nervously between Marcus and me. I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word, fueled by a righteous indignation. "A trust for my benefit, you say, with you, Marcus, as the sole trustee, and a clause, if I recall correctly, about immediate transfer of full ownership upon my passing." My words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding, exposing the bare bones of their deception. Marcus blanched, his carefully constructed composure momentarily crumbling like a fragile facade. "Nonsense, Aunt Eleanor. You must be confused," he stammered, his eyes darting frantically to Chloe for support, a silent plea for reinforcement. She picked up the baton seamlessly, her voice regaining its artificial sweetness, though tinged with a desperate edge. "Oh, Eleanor, darling, your memory isn't quite what it used to be, is it? We simply put things into a trust for your benefit. It's all very clever, really, protects you from any future complications, from any difficult decisions." Her condescension was palpable, a veiled insult wrapped in a thin, almost transparent veneer of concern, a deliberate attempt to undermine my lucidity. My chest tightened with suppressed fury, but I held my ground, my gaze unwavering. "A trust for my benefit, you say?" I repeated, my voice now cold and precise. "With you as the sole trustee, and a clause about immediate transfer upon my passing, a clause that effectively disinherits me while I am still alive." I watched their faces, absorbing every nuance of their reactions. Marcus's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing into suspicious, hostile slits. Chloe's saccharine smile finally dissolved completely, replaced by a cold, calculating stare, a raw malevolence that chilled me to the bone. "Eleanor, what is this about?" Marcus demanded, his voice now entirely devoid of pretense, laced with genuine anger and a flash of fear. "Are you getting ideas? Someone putting things in your head? Who have you been talking to?" The anger in his voice, the sudden, violent shift from feigned concern to outright hostility, confirmed everything I had already suspected. They were furious, not because I was confused or mistaken, but because I was seeing through their carefully crafted deception, because I dared to challenge their meticulously planned usurpation. Chloe's voice rose, shrill and accusing, echoing with a desperate defensiveness. "You always were so dramatic, Auntie. Just sign the papers and stop causing trouble. We're trying to help you. Don't you see that?" Her words, meant to belittle and intimidate, only solidified my resolve, hammering it into an unshakable steel. They believed their lies so completely, they couldn't even fathom a genuine challenge from their senile victim, couldn't comprehend that I was reclaiming my agency. The confrontation ended abruptly with them storming out of my dining room, their footsteps heavy with frustration and barely suppressed rage, leaving the air thick with their unresolved anger. Suddenly silent save for the faint echo of their baseless accusations. They had exposed their true nature, confirming their complete lack of guilt or remorse, their utter contempt for me. Their performance had crumbled, replaced by naked greed and undisguised contempt. I knew then that my subtle probing was over. The time for a full, undeniable strike was rapidly approaching. My heart ached with the pain of their profound betrayal, a grief that resonated deep within my bones, but it was also hardening, steeling itself for the brutal, unforgiving battle ahead. This wasn't just about reclaiming my home. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my agency, and confronting the profound cruelty of those who had once claimed to love me. Chapter 7. The unveiling of the predator's claws. Their reaction to my pointed questions about the papers was not merely swift, but chillingly brutal. A calculated counterstrike that peeled away the last layers of their deceit. The fragile facade of caring relatives shattered completely, revealing the raw, ugly greed and cold calculation that had lurked beneath their smiles all along. Their visits, already sporadic and tinged with impatience, ceased entirely, plunging my home into a desolate silence that was almost as suffocating as their presence. Marcus stopped taking my calls, his voicemail box a tomb for my unanswered pleas. Chloe's infrequent texts, when they came, were curt, devoid of any pretense of affection, laced with thinly veiled accusations, demanding to know who was poisoning my mind, and what lawyer was filling my head with nonsense. The subtle psychological abuse escalated into overt, undeniable intimidation, a terrifying game of cat and mouse where I was the prey. They began to send menacing letters, official-looking documents hinting at elderly care mandates and property management assessments, clearly designed to frighten and disorient me, to make me doubt my own capacity to live independently. They even, with brazen audacity, changed the locks on my back door, claiming it was for my safety. But the cold click of the new bolt felt less like protection and more like a cage tightening around me, sealing me in. My beloved home, once a cherished sanctuary, now felt less like a haven and more like a battleground, its walls witnessing my silent, escalating terror. The most unnerving escalation, however, came with the insidious disappearance of my cherished belongings. Not just small, insignificant trinkets, but objects that held immense sentimental value, each a tangible thread woven into the fabric of my life. A framed photograph of Robert and me on our wedding day, its silver frame now inexplicably absent from my bedside table. A delicate porcelain bird figurine my mother had brought back from Japan, a fragile symbol of our shared history, gone from its perch on the mantelpiece. When I finally managed to reach Marcus over the phone, his voice was chillingly calm, devoid of any genuine surprise or concern, almost bored. "Oh, Aunt Alina, you really must be confused," he said, feigning a weary patience. "Those things have been safely stored away for ages. You probably just forgot where you put them. You know how you are these days, a little scatterbrained." Chloe, on speakerphone, added a snide remark, her voice dripping with contempt. "Perhaps she's hiding them from herself. It wouldn't be the first time. Honestly, she's losing her marbles." This blatant gaslighting, combined with the outright theft, was a profound psychological assault, meticulously designed to make me doubt my own sanity, to erode my self-worth, to break my spirit and hasten my inevitable disappearance from the property they so craved. Their attempts to make me question my memory, to subtly imply I was losing my grip on reality, felt like a deliberate, calculated attempt to erase me, piece by agonizing piece. My hands trembled with a simmering rage, a silent scream trapped within my throat. But I held my tongue, knowing that any outburst, any display of emotion would only fuel their cruel narrative of my supposed instability. Instead, I documented every missing item, every veiled threat, every instance of their manipulative behavior, relaying it all in hushed, urgent tones to David, my astute lawyer. David, a seasoned elder law attorney, was more than just legal counsel. He was a calm port in my storm, a steady hand guiding me through the swirling tempest of their betrayal. He listened patiently, his face grim, as I recounted each new act of aggression. He confirmed my deepest fears. Marcus and Chloe were systematically trying to isolate me, diminish my perceived competence in the eyes of any potential witness, and strip me of my remaining assets before I could truly gather my strength and fight back effectively. "Alina," he'd said, his voice grave, the weight of his words pressing down on me, "they are trying to declare you legally incompetent." Your ability to remember details, to track these events, to articulate your experiences will be absolutely crucial in court. Every single piece of evidence you gather, no matter how small, matters. This revelation, though terrifying in its implications, paradoxically solidified my resolve, hardening it into an unshakable core. I was not just fighting for my home, for my legacy. I was fighting for my mind, for my autonomy, for my very identity. The assault on my dignity was relentless, each new blow designed to break me. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, a large, garish for sale sign, brazenly emblazoned with a local real estate agent's aggressive logo, appeared on my front lawn. My blood ran cold, a glacial current flowing through my veins, leaving a trail of ice in its wake. They hadn't even waited for my passing. They were selling my home, my beloved sanctuary, the living monument to my lineage, while I was still living in it. This was an act of profound, unspeakable disrespect. A public declaration of their imminent victory, designed to mock my very existence, to rub their triumph in my face. The sheer brazenness of it, the absolute certainty of their triumph, was sickening, a bitter taste that clung to my tongue. I called David immediately, my voice shaking with a potent mixture of anger, despair, and a raw, unadulterated fury. "They put a for sale sign in my yard," I choked out, tears finally streaming down my face, hot and unforgiving. "While I'm still here, while I'm still alive." David's response was immediate and resolute, cutting through my despair like a sharp knife. "Eleanor, this crosses a line. A major line. We have enough evidence. We're filing injunctions immediately. We're going for a full judicial review of those documents they made you sign, and we're challenging their claims of power of attorney." His words, firm and clear, were a lifeline, a promise of impending action. The game had changed. Their subtle manipulations and cruel dismissals had escalated into a blatant, undeniable attempt to usurp my life, to erase my existence. The battle for my ancestral home, my precious legacy, and my very soul was about to move from the shadows of my living room into the stark, unforgiving light of the courtroom, where truths would be laid bare and justice, hopefully, served. The final straw had broken, shattering the last vestiges of my fragile patience, and now the reckoning, long overdue, would truly begin. I wiped my tears, a steely, unyielding determination settling over me, hardening my features. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to claim my life before I had even left it. They would soon learn that Eleanor, though aged, though having weathered a storm, was far from gone. In fact, she was just beginning to fight. Chapter 8. The Reckoning and Rebirth. The courtroom, usually a bastion of solemnity and impersonal justice, felt charged with an almost palpable tension on the day of the hearing. The air crackled with unspoken accusations and the weight of profound betrayal. Marcus and Chloe sat across the aisle from me, separated by the cold, polished oak of the benches, their faces carefully composed into a mask of wronged innocence, a theatrical performance that barely concealed the underlying arrogance and simmering frustration that emanated from them. Marcus, in his crisp, expensive suit, his usual smug smile now replaced by a tight, strained grimace, kept his gaze fixed straight ahead, avoiding my eyes. Chloe, in a pastel dress that seemed too bright for the somber setting, nervously picked at a loose thread on her manicured hands, her earlier saccharine charm completely absent, replaced by a twitching apprehension. They had so profoundly underestimated me. The senile old fool they believed would simply fade away. Assuming my post-stroke confusion rendered me utterly incapable of fighting back. They were about to learn, with a harsh, undeniable clarity, just how grievously wrong they were. David, my lawyer, sat beside me, his solid, reassuring presence a comforting anchor in the swirling anxiety of the moment, his meticulously prepared files, thick with damning evidence, a silent testament to our shared mission, to the truth we were about to unveil. The hearing began with David laying out our case, piece by piece, building an undeniable narrative of deceit and exploitation. He spoke with a quiet, authoritative power, his words deliberate and precise. He presented the meticulously organized bank statements, highlighting the egregious, unauthorized transfers, five-figure sums, that had flowed from my primary savings account into Marcus's and Chloe's personal accounts, money siphoned off under the guise of care and management. He then played the recordings, each audio clip a chilling echo of their greed and malice. Marcus's voice, smug and confident, discussing their easy mark and the carefully laid plan to claim my inheritance, filled the courtroom. Chloe's brittle, mocking laughter, the sound of her calling me a senile old fool, resonated with undeniable clarity, stripping away their flimsy pretense of concern, exposing their true, cruel nature for all to hear. The cold, calculated words, uttered with such casual contempt, seemed to hang in the air, leaving a collective gasp in their wake. Then came the papers, the very documents they had pressured me to sign in my weakest moments. David methodically, painstakingly, pointed out the egregious irregularities, the complete lack of independent legal counsel, the complex legal clauses that utterly stripped me of my rights and ownership, all signed during a period of documented cognitive vulnerability following my stroke. Marcus attempted to interject, his voice thick with indignation. She volunteered. She wanted to simplify things. We were only helping. But David silenced him with a calm, firm tone, presenting the doctor's report detailing my impaired cognitive state during that specific period, effectively rendering Marcus's protest baseless. Chloe, at one point, burst into a dramatic, tearful act, sobbing, "We only ever wanted to help her. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." Her theatrical performance, however, fell painfully flat, utterly unconvincing in the face of the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence of their calculated, systematic deception. When it was my turn to speak, a profound hush fell over the courtroom, broken only by the faint rustle of papers. I looked directly at Marcus and Chloe, my gaze unwavering, my voice, though soft and carrying the faint tremor of age, imbued with the immense weight of years of profound betrayal and a newfound, unyielding strength that resonated with every syllable. "They came into my home," I began, my voice clear, carrying to every corner of the room, my gaze sweeping across the faces of the judge, the lawyers, the few curious onlookers, and finally, settling back on my nephew and his wife, forcing them to meet my gaze. "They claimed to be there to help me, to care for me in my hour of need. Instead, they poisoned my peace, mocked my vulnerability, and systematically tried to steal everything I hold dear." I recounted the subtle pressures, the relentless insistence on signatures, the way Marcus's finger hovered over the lines, the chilling sound of Chloe's mocking laughter as I struggled to comprehend. I spoke of the missing heirlooms, the changed locks on my back door that made me feel like a prisoner in my own house, the brazen audacity of the "for sale" sign planted in my front yard while I was still living there, a public declaration of their victory before it was even won. "They called me senile," I stated, my voice unwavering, laced with a cold, precise anger. But my mind was clear enough to recognize their greed, and my spirit was strong enough to fight back. "I may be old, but I am not broken, and I am certainly not foolish." Marcus looked away, his face pale and drawn, unable to meet my gaze, his arrogance crumbling into shame. Chloe continued to dab at her eyes with a pristine handkerchief, but her act was unconvincing, her trembling hands giving away her true fear. The judge, after a long, thoughtful pause that seemed to stretch into an eternity, delivered the verdict. The documents I had signed were declared null and void, procured under duress and through the exploitation of a vulnerable elder. The egregious, unauthorized transfers from my accounts were to be repaid in full, with substantial interest, a painful blow to their ill-gotten gains. Furthermore, Marcus and Chloe would face further investigation for elder fraud and other potential criminal charges, their names now tarnished, their carefully constructed lives on the brink of ruin. It was a complete, undeniable victory. As the judge's gavel struck the wood with a sharp, resonant thud, a wave of profound relief, exhilarating and utterly liberating, washed over me, displacing the tension that had gripped me for what felt like an eternity. Marcus and Chloe quickly gathered their few belongings, their hurried, desperate departure a stark and humiliating contrast to their triumphant, confident arrival in my home months earlier. They left the courtroom like shadows, defeated, exposed, their elaborate scheme having unraveled into public shame. I felt no savage joy in their downfall, no cruel satisfaction in their humiliation, only a quiet, resolute sense of vindication. My home was safe. My legacy was intact. I had not only reclaimed my property but also my dignity, my autonomy, and perhaps most importantly, my peace of mind. As I walked out of the courthouse, Susan, my steadfast friend, by my side, the sunlight felt warmer, the air cleaner, infused with the scent of possibility. I had fought for myself. I had spoken the truth, and I had won. The path ahead was clear, finally free of the shadows they had cast over my life. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please make sure to subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments.